Good morning. Today is 10th February 2026. And of course, my name is Winifred Gwebo, your host on the program Inside Nigeria, reaching you on Leadership Television. Today's program, we are looking at what the national papers are saying, as usual on the program. And of course, we have the paper leading the pack for review this Tuesday, Leadership newspaper, nation's foremost influential newspaper. Let's head up to Leadership. Leadership is still on developing story on the opera that greeted the Senate's handling of the electoral bill, and Leadership says protests mount over Senate's rejection of mandatory e-transmission of results. Protests mount over Senate's rejection of mandatory e-transmission of results. Obi joins calls of protesters at National Assembly. Editors express concern. CSO, Southern and Middle Belt leaders insist on mandatory transmission of poll results. But let's see what happened, because the Senate is convening today to look at the issue, and one could only hope that they do the necessary and they abide by the citizens' wishes. Protests mount over Senate's rejection of mandatory e-transmission of results, and that story continues on page 7 of Leadership. Incidentally, that is the paper that is also leading some of the papers we have for lineup this Tuesday. Banditry, terrorism not part of our culture, Tinubu. Nigerians grappling with hardship, Reps panel. That story is on page 12 of Leadership. Government adopt 9 Catholic worshippers in Benue. That story is on page 21 of Leadership. Government adopts 9 Catholic worshippers in Benue. Appeal Court opposed Senate suspension of Natasha. U.S. intervention in Nigeria a blessing, says Oluremi Tinubu. That's U.S. intervention in Nigeria a blessing, says Oluremi Tinubu. We have the picture gracing the cover of Leadership this Tuesday, and of course it's been a developing story. It's also the picture we have on some of the papers we have for review this Tuesday. We have the former President Goodluck Jonathan, Senate President Godswill Akpabio, Chairman of Manton Engineering, Mr. Matthew Tolaga, and his wife, Deaconess Dr. Esther Tolaga, during the 50th birthday celebration and book presentation of Mr. Tolaga in Abuja on Sunday. Congratulations to the celebrant. Of course, the papers have been awash with congratulatory messages for him. We move towards the masthead of Leadership, where we have a business cover. NCC begins telecom policy overhaul, 6 lower right of way fees, streamline taxes. And above the masthead, we have just 2 days to go. Countdown to Leadership's conference and award ceremony taking place this Thursday, 12th February. 2026. Of course, is happening live here in Abuja. Don't forget that the Leadership Person of the Year 2025 is our own First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu. Congratulations to her once again. From the cover, we move to the page 3 of Leadership, where we have our stand. Today's stand is on snake bite Ifunanya and the rest of us. Snake bite Ifunanya and the rest of us. Today's stand in Leadership. From the stand, we move to the back page. The third page we actually review every day on this show, and today's back page column, that is Tuesday column, is with Abdurrauf Aliyu. Today's column is on Kayama, Anatomy of a Preventable Tragedy. Kayama, Anatomy of a Preventable Tragedy. We will take some quotes from the Tuesday's column. History teaches that peripheral violence, if ignored, rarely remains contained. Government interventions must go beyond temporary troop deployments or public statements. Security must be sustained, intelligence-led, and complemented by structural interventions. Today's quote from Tuesday's column, back page of Leadership, Kayama, Anatomy of a Preventable Tragedy, with Abdurrauf Aliyu. And before we leave the back page, let's visit Ghana Must Go. Ghana Must Go says Nigeria needs a leader who can die for her, coming from Omotola. And Ghana Must Go is asking Omotola, like you, Omotola, over to you. And that also concludes review of Leadership newspaper this Tuesday. For more, log into the website of Tuesday of Leadership newspaper, www.leadership.ng. We heads up to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Vanguard. Vanguard, still the same developing story on Electoral Bill. It says Electoral Act, Senate open to criticism, will resolve issue today, coming from Senate spokesman. Electoral Act, Senate open to criticism, will resolve issue today, Senate spokesman. Protest rocks NAS over e-transmission of results. Obi joins protest, says Nigerians don't want glitch again. NGE Agbakoba Ame, MCE, Fees Politics, others speak. CSOs demand real-time results, downloadable voters' cards. And of course, we have the picture of the protesters at National Assembly with Peter Obi yesterday, gracing the cover of Vanguard, and it's just beneath the leading story. Electoral Act, Senate open to criticism, will resolve issue today. Senate spokesman. Protest rocks NAS over e-transmission of results. Obi joins protest, says Nigerians don't want glitch again. NGE, Akpakoba, Ame, MCE, Fees Politics, others speak. CSOs demand real-time results, downloadable voters' cards. Still on Vanguard newspaper, Sanwo-Olu flanks off health safety initiative for 10,000 Lagos drivers. Children chant our communities are home as Lagos lawmakers visit Makoko. And the second leading story on today's Vanguard says Nigeria will continue borrowing to fund 25.91 trillion naira budget deficit, coming from Senate, as NAS vows not to approve further budget rollovers subsidies. Rivers crisis, Fubara Wike meet Tinubu in Abuja. Suspension appeal court dismisses Natasha's case, says Senate acted within its powers. Chell says why it's difficult for new players to break into Super Eagles. And that takes us to the stories above the masthead of Vanguard. CBN NCC proposed 30 minutes timeline for refund on paid airtime data purchases. That's a good one. CBN NCC proposed 30 minutes timeline for refund on paid airtime data purchases. 9 worshippers abducted during night vigil in Benue Catholic Church. Midnight abduction sparks protest in Kaduna's Millennium City. And of course, leadership says government abduct 9 Catholic worshippers in Benue. Banditry, terrorism are economic hindrances we must overcome, coming from President Tinubu. And lastly, on the cover of Vanguard newspaper this Tuesday, U.S. intervention in Nigeria, a blessing, coming from our First Lady, Remi Tinubu. And that story runs on page 8 of Vanguard. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on Vanguard this Tuesday. For more, log into www.vanguardngr.com. From Vanguard, we move over to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is the Punch newspaper. Every paper is talking Electoral Bill. The Punch says Senate reconvenes today as Electoral Act triggers opera. Obi joins NAS protesters. Kuka demands review. Anger mounts over controversial amendment. Akpabio leads 10th emergency session. Leading story on today's The Punch newspaper. Senate reconvenes today as Electoral Act triggers opera. We also have the same picture of former president, Senate president, and the celebrant chairman, Maton Engineering. It's the Matthew Tolaga on his 50th birthday, which commemorated with a book presentation of his presentation to mark his 50th birthday in Abuja yesterday. Oyo princes launch court fights to preserve Alaafin supremacy. Oyo princes launch court fights to preserve Alaafin supremacy. President vows to replace open grazing with ranching reforms. Over 75 million Nigerians face retirement without pensions, PENCOM. Again, U.S. to deport 18 Nigerians on criminal list. CBNCC proposed instant refunds for paid airtime data. And we move to just beneath the masthead today. The Punch newspaper has its editorial on the cover of the paper. It says Kwara massacre, Save Southwest, launch major military campaign in Kwara, Niger. We'll take some excerpts from that editorial, which starts today on the cover of the Punch. It says, after a Boko Haram offshoot, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wa Muslimli mercilessly massacred nearly 200 people in the Nuku and Woro communities of Kayama local government area, Kwara State, on Tuesday, Nigeria now faces a national security emergency. To stem the spread of the jihadists to the southwest, whose states share borders with Kwara. The Punch urges President Bola Tinubu and the security chiefs to launch a major military operation to flush out the terrorists from their forest hideouts in Kwara, Niger and Kogi states. The bloody onslaught by the terrorists is not an isolated event. It is a loud warning and signal of a dangerous southward expansion of Boko Haram-linked terrorism from the northeast and north central into Nigeria's economic heartland. Without a decisive offensive against the Abubakar Seidu-led JNM, the Southwest, regarded as the safest region in a sea of national violence, is at risk of being overrun by the deadly insurgents. We just took some excerpts from today's editorial in the Punch newspaper, which today is also running on the cover. Kwara massacre saves Southwest launch major military campaign in Kwara, Niger. Lastly, on the cover of the Punch, we have beside the masthead, banditry crisis. Federal government rejects Northern governor's call to suspend mining. And that concludes the review of front headline stories on the Punch newspaper this Tuesday. For more, log in to www.punchng.com. From the Punch, we move to the next paper on our lineup, still talking Electoral Act Amendment saga, and that is Daily Sun newspaper. Daily Sun says Kuka Center, Yaga Africa others want mandatory result transmission, asks NAS to adopt House of Reps version. Electoral Act Amendment saga, Kuka Center, Yaga Africa others want mandatory result transmission, asks NAS to adopt House of Reps version. A leading story today on Daily Sun newspaper, like we read before it. Other papers which we had reviewed earlier before Daily Sun also has same story on developing story actually on the Electoral Act saga. Nigeria will continue borrowing to fund 25.91 trillion naira budget deficit. Senate editors urge NAS to adopt mandatory immediate election results transmission, says Senate's position creating room for doubt, mistrust. Editors urge NAS, National Assembly, to adopt mandatory immediate election results transmission, says Senate's position creating room for doubt, mistrust. Appeal Court opposed Senate suspension of Natasha. CBN NCC to crack down on bank telcos over airtime failures. And just beneath the masthead of Daily Sun, we have Kwara massacre, just like we saw earlier on in the Punch newspaper. Kwara massacre. Tinubu vows to end insecurity, pledges to fight terrorism with determination. Lastly, on the cover of Daily Sun, OBCSO's activists occupy NANS over Senate's rejection of real-time electronic transmission of election results. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on the Daily Sun newspaper this Tuesday. For more, log into www.thesun.ng. From Daily Sun, we move to the last paper we have on our lineup, and that is The Guardian. The Guardian says fresh killings, abductions, heightened security fears amid drone attacks. Fresh killings, abductions, heightened security fears amid drone attacks. Well, the picture of occupied NAS yesterday with also that of Peter Obi. We have protesters carrying placards. We also see a retinue of security there. Senate to harmonize Electoral Act today amid protest over real-time transmission. Residents protest as terrorists abduct 7 in Kaduna. NANS NEC seek judiciary's aid for grid power sector stability. Nigeria's internet speed slips, ranks 85th globally. Natasha loses suspension appeal as court quashes 5 million naira contempt fine. Cross River magistrates begin indefinite strike over poor welfare. And that takes us to the stories just beneath the masthead of The Guardian. Fresh borrowings loom as 2026 budget faces 25.27 trillion naira deficit. Tinubu weighs into Fubara Wike rift again. GDP figures no longer enough to measure progress, says Shettima. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on The Guardian this Tuesday. For more, log into www.guardian.ng. Well, viewers, it's on this note to conclude today's Inside Nigeria, where we review front headline stories on some select national newspapers, including Nigeria's foremost newspaper leadership. And don't forget also to join us same time, same station for another fresh edition of the program. Also forget to follow us on all our social media handles. Like and subscribe to them. My name is Unifor Webo. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.